And welcome to the Win Daily PGA live stream. This is weird, Joel. It's just me and you. Where's Michael? I guess he has a previous engagement. I'm not too happy about it, but me and Joel are going to be co-hosting today. And I got to tell you, Joel, I was just going to lead with, hey, what do you think about this course, the Players Championship? This is going to be really, to me, this is going to be like an amazing DFS opportunity. I think a lot of people have different opinions about this particular tournament in terms of being able to peg golfers, but forget about that. I want to talk about the bet you made on Thursday at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. Before the show even starts, it's so incredibly unbelievable. I actually had to see the ticket to believe it. Can you just tell the audience what happened last Thursday?
Yeah, so I would say, as you know, like we're playing showdown, so every round, we're in the action. So I usually do for every round I'm at least playing showdown or I'm involved. I usually put in a bet because I'm getting a parlay bet where I'm taking the matchups based on guys that I like for that slate. I lose every time. I usually bet 20, $25. But what I've noticed is that I'm getting closer, right? So last couple of weeks I've hit like 7 or 8 of my 10, 11 legs. And so I'm pretty close. So put it in this week. And so the bet was $26, 11 legs, and it was to win 300,000. I didn't end up winning 300,000. So what happens is if golfers push, you don't get that leg of the bet. So I ended up having actually 3 golfers push. So it ended up becoming an 8-leg parlay. So it ended up being $26 to win 39,000. And it was electric. So like in terms of watching it, going into 17. It was against Bradley. That was the matchup I had. I had and Im was down a stroke. So with only 2 holes to go, it wasn't looking good to make up a stroke in 2 holes. And on 17, Bradley bogeys. I'm like, okay, well, now we're tied. And then Im hits a terrible approach shot into the sand. And I'm like, oh, wait, there it goes. I'm going to lose again. And he sinks like a 15-footer to still have the hole. And then that gets me the W for my 39K. So I was pretty ecstatic about that.
So, okay, just to be clear here, was it head-to-head matchups that you were those the leg of your parlays, or was it like kind of group betting that you were doing?
So I do group betting. So it's interesting. So I did the group bet, and they had the offers for every round, every day on DraftKings. Since I won, and I can't actually claim this because of me, since I've won, DraftKings has not offered another group bet for the rest of the tournament. And I was looking for it. I'm like, I group bet every time. And like, because that's how you get the good odds, right? You get the extended 15, 20 points, but on a parlay, that adds up, and that's why you get the big juice. So if you're just doing matchups, it's hard to get that big of a payout. And so I haven't seen it since. So I hope it comes back for this week for the players, but I still haven't seen it on their site.
Yeah, Joel, that's not a coincidence. I'm telling you that your payout got red flagged, and then they went into whatever the internal controls are, and they're like, yeah, we can't have this type of payout. That's amazing. Congratulations. It's funny, like you're coming off a week where you won 50,000 in Showdown. We know how much you've won in Showdown and just in regular DraftKings Golf and DraftKings NBA just in the last like 2 or 3 months. I mean, the numbers are like staggering. We don't need to go over them again, but believe me when I tell you they are so ridiculous. It's literally life-changing money. I mean, if you think 39,000 is life-changing money, it is, of course, but like Joel, you are knocking it out of the park. I'll tell you what. I came close to 50,000. I was in the $200 single entry, the big one, the one with 1,100. There's 2 of them that they usually offer. I was in both, and actually I had 6 for 6 in both, which was awesome. But the other 6 for 6 barely cashed. It did cash, fortunately. But I had everybody you needed except Bryson DeChambeau, and I ended up finishing 20th place out of 1,100. Not bad, but I was probably 10 or 12 places from like that money that's like that the Masters money that I won, where I came in second place in I think the $100 single entry, and I came in I think I had about 10,000 just from the Masters alone in DFS. So I'm looking for that kind of money, Joel. You find it pretty much every other weekend. So speaking of, we're here at the Players. We got a huge field here. It's just absolutely loaded. The only guys we don't have are, I guess, Brooks Koepka and of course Tiger Woods and Matt Wolff, if you want to count
him.
And
before we transition too much into the tournament, I do want to touch on one thing. We do this show weekly, but we all play weekly. One thing that's really important to think about, and when you're building lines, obviously you want to win the tournament, you want to get first place, and you're trying to pick that way. But another thing to think about, like Sia just mentioned, he gets 6 of 6 quite often. This week he didn't have Bryson, so he couldn't really. You're not going to win without the winner. But he did pretty well. if you can consistently cash, right, it's going to make playing this a lot better. You don't. It's not. Yeah, one day you want to win the big 50K, and that's obviously the point. But it's going to be a lot harder to do that if you're losing and losing and losing weekly, because you can't keep playing if you're just a constant loser. So if you can get 6 out of 6, cash, then the week where you finally hit and hit the 50K, like, you can keep putting your shots out there to do so. So that's the biggest thing. Think about that when you're playing weekly. Like, yeah, you want to take some of your GPP shots, but as long as you're getting your 6 out of 6 and cashing week to week, that's the important thing to be able to keep the train moving.
Yeah, and I actually encourage people to try some of the double ups. I think a lot of people think of golf as, and Joel, I know you kind of lean just towards GPPs with golf, but if you find those double up tournaments, especially the ones that have a pretty big field, whether it's 200 or some of them are 1,000 or 1,500, like those are really good tournaments to enter, because again, you don't even necessarily need your 6 for 6, maybe 5 out of 6 cashes, but those are a really good way to sustain your bankroll. I'll tell you what Win Daily is really good about is sometimes we'll put out podcasts. Like there was a guy in the chat that was asking about the podcast that you did, Joel, with Michael, where you were actually explaining your showdown process, and like stuff like that we're really good at doing. We have articles on the site windailysports.com about sustaining your bankroll, about not throwing all your money in GPPs, not playing the big GPPs where you're not max entering them. Like that's really important, because if there's 150 max entry and you're putting in 2 lineups, well, that's okay if that's like 10% of your bankroll. It's definitely not okay if it's like 30% of your bankroll or 40% of your bankroll or anything bigger than that. So don't look at the big number at the end, the guarantee necessarily. Look at, what the max entry is. And if it's single entry or 3 max, that's kind of what I recommend, unless you're doing, what Joel does a lot, which is max entering these tournaments, it's a great idea. It's a great thing if you have the bankroll and you have the time and the expertise to do it. But most people don't do that. So,
and I'll add that I do sit there for every tournament that I enter, and I calculate the math, and I say, if I enter this many lineups, this is what I can win. Is it worth my risk to enter this many lineups based on the payout? Some weeks it's not. Some weeks it is. That's an exercise I do before I do it, and that's something we should all be doing, right? Like before you enter a tournament, don't just enter it because you like the fact that it says you can make 50,000. Enter it because the ratio is good, right? The amount of lineups that you can enter versus how many people are in it makes sense, that it's worth you going into there and competing.
So turning our attention to the Players' Championship. So one thing that, I did the show, I'm doing the first cut with Rick Gaiman and Greg Ducharme on Mondays. And that's a fantastic show. I encourage everybody to watch that just to kind of lead your week off, to be honest with you. I think it's a great, because we talk about DFS. We're usually kind of first to market, or at least one of the first ones to market in terms of talking up players and getting that going. And I'll tell you, Joel, one thing that I sort of gleaned from that show that I'm really kind of questioning is this elite range here, which of course DraftKings pricing 10K and above, and that 8K range is just, I'm very confused by it. When I did my initial picks write-up, which I published on the site, again, windailysports.com earlier today, I literally didn't have any 8K guys in there. And usually I like to pick off a couple from each tier, but I was like, you know what? I'm not going to force it with my initial picks article. I'm going to jump on the show with Joel. We're going to talk it through. I'm going to, use the resources that Win Daily has in, as the week progresses. I'll have a couple guys in the 8K range, maybe a Matthew Fitzpatrick, maybe a Terrell Hatton. But I'll tell you what, this top range is a little befuddling to me too, because the 9K range is so rich, and everybody looks at that 9K range, they're like, wow, their eyes are popping. So I'm not going to say it's contrarian to go up here in this elite range. Of course it's not. People will be all over this range, but I'm just curious as to who you like in this range, because there's one guy in particular that I like, but I'm not even sure that's the right answer here. So tell me, start it off for us.
Well, I think what's interesting about this week is there's so much value, even in like the 7,000 range.
Yep.
That you can be really creative in how you want to build your lineups, right? You're not going to jam in Rom, Shoffley, and DJ. No, you can't do that. But the point is, there's not a huge delta between Shoffley and Morikawa, right? And there's a price difference. Even going down a little bit further into Finau, right? Finau is playing as good as anyone in the world, and to say like you definitely want to play Rom over Finau, it's kind of a coin flip to me. Now that doesn't mean that Rom can't go out there and win this tournament. He absolutely can. He's one of the best golfers in the world. But there's a lot of ways looking at this slate where we can get interesting on how we build, and saying that, I feel playing this DFS slate, getting Finau out there over Rom is something I'm going to do because of how it constructs my lineups, right? Because because Rom just costs a lot more, and Finau's playing great, and I can save $1,000, not have to use anyone in the 6K range, build a well-rounded lineup, And then, if Rom goes out and wins, this won't be the week for me, but that's okay. Right? That's the thought process of how we're going to have to build this week.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I don't know if I want to include Patrick Reed in this discussion. I probably should. But if you go from Patrick Reed up to Dustin Johnson, I mean, you're really splitting hairs in this tournament between the 9K range and the 11K range more than you ever have. Because to your point, I can make an argument for Tony Finau. If you just look at his metrics, if you just look at the last 12 rounds, last 24 rounds on approach, I mean, Tony Finau's knocking it out of the ballpark. You look at him off the tee, he's killing it there too. He's obviously come in second a couple of times here and probably should have come in first one of these times. Patrick Cantlay is a super popular guy this week for whatever reason. He's not necessarily super popular for me, but he's popping in such a way that, listen, Patrick Cantlay, Victor Hovland, Colin Morikawa, all these guys can be sort of, I wouldn't blink if they were in the Justin Thomas or that Brooks Koepka range. I know Brooks isn't in the tournament, but if they were in that 9,900, 10,100 range, no problem. So I think you should kind of look at this elite range and this 9K range almost as one range, as opposed to just breaking it off in tiers. So, but let's just start with the top four, Joel. Is there one of these four or two of these four that you're really focusing on?
So the interesting thing about this top range especially is because this tournament's so deep, for lack of a better term, the ownership level of some of these guys is going to be way lower than we would normally anticipate, right? You're not normally going to get DJ, Rahm, Thomas at around 10%, right? They're typically going into a tournament 20 or 30% owned. So if you love one of these guys this week and you want to hammer one of them, like if you want to take a stance on one, this is the best week to do it. And in fairness, there is a reason for it, right? Because there's a lot more competition at the top. But that's kind of now the elite range is a way to be different, which is a weird kind of thing to wrap your head around. With that being said, Dustin Johnson, it was what? Still hours ago, we were comparing him to Prime Tiger on the show. Hours, right? Like, and what happens? He has a bad weekend, not even a whole bad round, a bad weekend. And now everyone's it almost feels like I haven't heard anyone talk about him at all this week. And so I'm looking at that as, give me a guy who's probably still the best golfer in the world. Yes, his price is very high, but he's the best golfer in the world, who's also, if you look at his course history here, has been improving each year over the last 5 years. He's been getting better and better and better. I think this is a spot where it's the perfect time where people are starting to fall asleep on Dustin just a little bit, where we can get the best golfer in the world, a little bit better ownership. I love him. So he's probably the only guy I'm going to be targeting a lot up here in the top range for that reason. Other than that, I just think between Rory, Rahm, Schauffele, the other guys, we can kind of are not much different in value, and the savings are what we're going to need to build out well-rounded lineups.
Yeah, it's funny about DJ because before the first cut yesterday, we were talking about DJ, and I was like, you know what? It's 54th place finish. Last time out, he didn't seem very comfortable with the driver throughout the tournament, and then, somebody made an argument on the other side, and it's like, yeah, that's one tournament. Like Dustin Johnson, of all people, he pretty much forgot what he did yesterday, let alone 2 weeks ago, at the WGC. So like he's the guy that can shoot an 80 and go out and win the tournament the next week or 2 weeks later, which by the way he did. So yeah, I actually like DJ, and you're right, you're getting a slight discount on his ownership because he's sort of been out of mind just a little bit, and we have recency bias. So I will have a little bit of DJ. The only other guy I like here is Jon Rahm. I just think, first of all, Jon Rahm was really, he finished 12th last year, or 2019, I should say. But he was really competing, and he's such a good ball striker. His metrics sort of jump off the page to me too, off the tee, on approach. His putter has been a little bit off, but that's not the typical for Jon Rahm. So yeah, I like those two quite a bit. I don't think I'm really going to be on Xander or Rory. I'll tell you what though, the 9K range, I'm going to be starting a lot of lineups in that 9K range. But to your point, I think it's a decent opportunity relative to other weeks to take a guy like DJ.
For sure. And listen, anyone, I don't want to say, I'm not talking you off anyone in this range, right? My point is, it's how you're going to build your lines. If you like Rahm, if you like Schauffele, if you like Rory, they're all fine plays. They're all great golfers. In DFS, you can't play everybody, right? You got to take a stance before a week and make your plays. And so for that reason, for roster building construction purposes, not golf purposes, I'm the only guy in this range I'm really targeting is DJ.
So before we get to the 9K range, which we'll have a lot to talk about, Scott has this question, and I've actually kind of noticed this question Especially, I don't know how everybody does their prep. I do, I'm looking at models, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm kind of doing it all, looking at DraftKings and tournament history and you name it. I hear a lot from a lot of different podcasts, Joel, about, hey, just throw all the stats, just throw them away, like throw the papers in the air. This is one of those tournaments where you just can't lean on anything. And I just kind of feel like that's a cop-out. Like, I understand that various people, various types of golfers, talented and not so talented, can win this particular tournament. But I just feel like the reason it's such a packed field and you have guys in the 7K range that can win this tournament. Like you got, and we'll talk about it in the high 7K range in particular, you got guys that can win this tournament. You got guys in the low 7 or the high 6K range that have been pushed down. Like Emiliano Grillo, who I like, has been pushed down to like 6,700 and he's normally like a 7,400. So like you get all these guys sort of pushed down and it makes it look like, on Sunday afternoon, it makes it look like, well, if DJ's up there, but then you got a bunch of guys in the 8K and 7K range. Like, what if Abraham Answer is up there? What if Emiliano Grillo is up there? These are guys in this mid 7 and high 6K range. Joaquin Neiman, like, they can all be there. So, I mean, I understand that the notion that like, oh, it's just a crapshoot because, who knows who's going to be there on Sunday. But, this is sort of like why we're going through this experience. This is sort of why we're doing the podcast and we're putting all this work in, because there are things to measure, whether it be recent form or course history or strokes gained metrics. So again, I think it's a fair question, Scott, because at the end of the day, that's kind of what everybody is saying. But I think it's a cop-out. I mean, we'll see what the results are, but I genuinely think it's a cop-out.
I agree with you. And I'm not taking a shot at anyone by saying this, but I think you're right. I think it's the mentality of someone who's not winning, right? I lose. So let me just say that this is just a random thing. And you can just pick anyone random because I keep losing. And that's just not going to get you anywhere. I will say this tournament is different. So that is something I will say. You don't want to look at it the exact same way you look at other tournaments. And so that I'll agree with. And so one of the things is, for me personally, what I'm doing differently is, and I'm very open about, I overweight typically course history, where I want to find guys who have succeeded on the course previously. And one thing I've learned kind of doing my prep for this week is, while there is a course history for a lot of these guys to find, it is scattered in that there's guys who have won and missed the cut in consecutive years. So it's hard to really go too hard in the course history because you're not going to see too much of guys consistently getting top 10s, right? If you could see that, then there would be something there, but that you don't have. So I'm actually weighting my course history way down less this week than I normally do. And I've come way up on recent form, because what we have seen is every year, except for Webb Simpson, the winner of this tournament has been crushing the field on ball striking. And we want to find guys who are most likely to be able to repeat that, right? So who's striking the ball well now, who's in the best form. And I think those are the guys that are going to rise above the crop and find success this week at Sawgrass.
Yeah, and I agree. And with that said, I mean, there's a lot of guys that you can fit in the 9K range. It's going to be hard not to cover all of these guys. I'm going to cover. I think there's some interesting plays here, but we'll see if they come up just in the course of us talking about this range. I'll tell you the guys that I liked right off the bat and that I still like. Webb Simpson, who, by the way, to your point about recent form, 6th at the WGC after really a long break. His last tournament before that was the Waste Management, which was about over, I think, maybe a month before. So when he came into the WGC, I was kind of off him because I was like, I don't know, maybe he's a little rusty. It's been a little bit, and he performed admirably. So and he's a great course fit here, in my opinion. And his history here is very good: 16th, 1st, and 16th the last 3 years. So Webb Simpson really jumped out at me. Colin Morikawa jumped out at me. I don't want to say he was mispriced because it is a talent-laden field, but you're talking about recent form. Listen, Colin Morikawa is great. And by the way, round 1 last year was actually played. We know about Hideki Matsuyama, how he just shot the lights out. But Colin Morikawa really, really played well. He was 6th or 7th. I think he was tied for 7th at the time that the tournament ended, which was after round 1. So he does have, I guess, some experience with this course, and that experience is pretty good. So that was the other guy I liked. And Victor Hovland, I think, is really interesting because he performed so poorly on the weekend. And you couple that with the fact that people have been on Victor Hovland for like 3-4 weeks in a row. And what I deemed yesterday was kind of like Hovland fatigue. I'm not saying people just don't want to use Hovland, but when you have all these guys around Victor Hovland and you've been using Victor Hovland for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and Victor Hovland let you down on Saturday and Sunday, your likely move is to pivot to a Patrick Cantlay. Your likely move is to pivot to a Tony Finau, a Colin Morikawa, a Bryson DeChambeau, or a Justin Thomas. So I think you're going to get a sort of ownership discount on Victor Hovland. So for me, those are the 3 guys I like the most. After some research, I got to tell you, I keep ignoring this guy. He's just really hard to ignore at this point. Tony Finau. I mean, whatever model you create, last 12 rounds, last 24 rounds, you want to go by approach. You want to go by, certain distances on approach. You want to go by fairways gained off the tee, whatever it is. Tony Finau is going to be up there. He is just striking the ball so well. His short game has been very good. He's putting it well at times. I don't know how you get away from Tony Finau. So I would say those are the 4 guys I like the most. Joel, where are you at on the 9K range?
I'm with you in that this is the range that I'm most heavily targeting. I think this is how we're going to – I think one of the winners, in my opinion, is probably going to come out of this range. So I'll start off by saying I'm on board with all the guys you mentioned. Simpson, Morikawa, Hovland, Finau, I love. Don't love Bryson this week. It's not for because of golf reasons. It's just one of those things where it's like, is there a bit of a hangover? He just won a big tournament. 2, this course maybe isn't the best fit for his game, right? I think you want to target guys that are a little bit more accurate, whereas I'm not sure just bombing it, it's not that long of a course, is going to be that beneficial for him. So it's a course fit thing, and like I said, you have to fade some guys because otherwise there's just too many names to put out there. But I really like Justin Thomas. So one thing I saw this week kind of starting my research is Justin Thomas I don't remember how many seasons it was, over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, has the most birdies on this course of any golfer who's played it. Now, that's also a volume thing. I get it. So obviously Morikawa wouldn't qualify, hasn't played as many rounds. But scoring for DFS, we need birdie makers. We need guys who are going to get the scores that are low and aren't just going to, get the, like I always say, 9 birdies and 9 bogeys is better than 18 pars, right? And that's what Justin Thomas might give us. And you don't need him to even win the tournament, right? If Finau wins the tournament and you have Finau and Thomas gets in the top 5, that could be good enough for you to win and make a lot of money. So that's my thought process. He should be good for scoring purposes on DraftKings. So it's a matter of, is he going to find his form? He did show up at the WGC at a tied for 15th. At the Genesis, he missed the cut. That was a really tough course, and that was the week that he lost his grandfather. So one of those, you give him a pass, and then now, he's another one of those guys that feels like he's usually one of the top 2 or 3 guys we're talking about for a tournament, and I really haven't heard his name mentioned much. So I almost feel like I'm getting an ownership discount with him this week.
Well, here's the thing, and I got to say this before I get into the ownership that I'm looking at, because some of the ownership projections on a Monday or a Tuesday, depending on what site you go to, and honestly, I think this goes for a lot of sites, which is why we kind of wait until Wednesday night when Steven and his Palo Alto boys put those out on, again, windailysports.com. And we've actually we've gone back and done the math, and we've actually, checked the receipts on Steven's ownership. And that's why he waits till Wednesday, because it's really, really on point. But with all of that said, the preliminary ownership that I see for Justin Thomas is way higher than you or I would have ever thought. Honestly, it's beyond 20%, which if you compare that to really everybody else in the 9K range, that's number 1 outside of Patrick Cantlay from an ownership standpoint. So I think people are seeing what you're seeing, and I think they're seeing him having rebounded from the Genesis a little bit. What's interesting is, at the WGC, he was pretty bad off the tee rounds 1, 2, and 3. Now, he finally started gaining strokes off the tee in round 4, which is really good if you kind of look at okay, we're making progress here, and he's been awesome on approach. So it looks like his game is actually rounding into form. So he's a good play. I actually still think he's a little bit more risky than some of the guys I mentioned, but totally get his upside. You're right about the birdie making. You're looking for not finishing position necessarily. That's great, but you're looking for DraftKings scoring. And a guy like Bryson DeChambeau, who we mentioned, even when Bryson doesn't finish high, as long as he makes the cut, he just tears it up because he's making eagles. He's making birdies, and that's really what matters in DraftKings. So, yeah, I think Justin Thomas and Bryson would probably be on that sort of 3rd or 2nd tier of player in the 9K range, but I have absolutely no issue playing either of them. With that said, let me ask you this. Is Patrick Reed, because he's low owned. I mean, he's just going to be low owned. Is that guy, do you even bother throwing him in a GPP, or you're just going to stay away? There's too many other guys in the 9K range.
Like I said, I'm lowering my standard for tournament history, but I'm not eliminating it. So if you want to just take out all the factors that come into play with Reed, his history here is not good. I mean, the best finish I've seen from him in the last 5 years is tied for 22nd. At this price, that's probably not going to cut it. His recent form, he missed the cut last week. I mean, he won the 2 tournaments ago at the Farmers. He won it. And then he had a tie for 9th at the WGC, and then he missed the cut. So his most recent form just doesn't look good. There's a stat going around. I don't remember where I read it, but something along the line of the last 10 or 15 winners here had finished in the top 20 of their last start. So unlikely he's going to win the tournament. And like I said, there's so many other good options up here. He's just one of the guys I have to get away from.
Fair enough. And we have a question here that I probably should answer. Again, these are preliminary projections, and frankly, the ones I'm looking at are not Win Daily ones, Scott, and we'll have Win Daily ones tomorrow around 6 o'clock when Steven produces his numbers. But it looks like Dustin Johnson, and it looks like Rory. It looks like Dustin and Rory are in that like 16, 17, 18% range. And it looks like Rahm is like right under that by a couple percentage points. The lowest guy owned in that sort of elite tier is going to be Xander Schauffele. I think I can pretty much say that with confidence. He's going to be 5 or 6 percentage points lower owned than those 3 guys. But it looks like DJ's reasonably popular. I mean, I'm not going to say he's as much chalk as a guy like Patrick Cantlay seems to be, or even a Tony Finau or a Justin Thomas, because those guys are also going to be popular. But again, these are preliminary. We'll have, at Win Daily, we'll have better numbers tomorrow. So this 8K range, Joel, this is where I just don't know what to do. Like the first few lineups I've made, and I've made plenty of lineups already, a lot of them skip this range altogether. Okay. And it's easy for me to do that because I want to grab maybe 3 guys in the 9K range, or maybe 2 guys, or maybe a guy in the 10K range and the 9K range. And if I skip the 8K range, I can fit a lot of those high 7K guys that I was just sort of like talking about that I really like, that we'll get to. So, I think everybody sees this 8K range and kind of might see the same thing. So I don't want to avoid it altogether. I want to get some ownership leverage in this 8K range because I think you're probably getting some. With that said, I'm just not excited about any of these guys. I mean, I'm going to take a second look at Matthew Fitzpatrick and Tyrrell Hatton. I don't know if I want to jump aboard the Jordan Spieth train with all this water on this course. I don't know if I really believe in Hideki Matsuyama. I know what he shot last year at the same tournament, but his ball striking hasn't been very good. In the last couple tournaments that he's done well, he's actually done well with the short game, which I can't lean on. So, Daniel Berger's interesting to me. Who's jumping out at you here?
So yeah, again, this is another one where some of these guys we just are going to have to fade because there's a lot of good options in this range. So I wouldn't be upset with you for playing Berger. It just doesn't make my player pool, but more just because there's other guys I like. There's a lot to like about Berger too. So if you wanted to play him, that would be something I would have no problem with. I'm with you on Hideki. I haven't seen the recent form that we've seen from him in past years that makes me want to go to him this week. The guys I like here, I think one guy that's interesting, I think he's a little overpriced, which is scaring me a bit, but Scotty Scheffler, right? If we want to prioritize recent form, I mean, he has it. He was 5th at the WGC, 20th and 7th. So his recent form's there. The ball striking's there. No tournament history to speak of. So that's a little bit of a negative here. You could say that there's an advantage to the guys who have played Sawgrass before and have a good feel for it. If it's your first time here, it might be a little bit more difficult, kind of similar in vein to the Masters, right? You usually don't want to target guys who are their first time playing the Masters. So that's a little thing that scared me off, and his price tag's a little higher than I would have liked to see in Scotty Scheffler, but that could be a good thing, right? That could mean everyone else is seeing the same thing, and you get him at the ownership discount. I actually do like Spieth this week. I think what we're seeing with Spieth is he's found a way to not make his bad driving hurt him, right? He's still not a great driver. He's not gaining strokes off the tee or anything, but what he's not doing is he's not putting himself in dangerous positions, right? I think maybe where he's matured, what's advanced about his game is I think he's probably playing the fact that I know I'm not good off the tee, and so let me just not put myself in danger and win elsewhere. And that's what he's been doing the last few weeks, and it's been working. I mean, his short game's magical, right? He puts it within a few feet of the hole from anywhere, within 100 yards. And his ball striking has been as good as we've seen him strike the ball in a long time. So I think we're seeing a recent form with Jordan that we haven't seen in a long time. And at this price, right, this is a guy who's capable of playing as good as anyone in the tournament. So when we're looking at, is there a big difference between Jordan and Rory right now? If I can get $2,000 saved and I can play Spieth and build around that, then that's what I'm going to do. So so I like Jordan a lot, and to round out this range, the last two guys that I'll even mention are Hatton. Hatton's a guy who more often than not, is in that top range, right? He's right below your DeChambeau. He's the fifth or sixth price guy, so it's a loaded field. There's a reason for it, but his ball striking's there. His recent form for me is a mixed bag because I'm used to seeing him play better, right? He hasn't been bad. He's been pretty good recently. But it's 15, it's in the teens. I'm used to him in the top 10, so I'm kind of wishy-washy in his recent form, but I just think the price discount on what you're getting, the type of caliber golfer you're getting at this price is too good to ignore. And the last guy, more of a GP pay play than a cash play, is Jason Day. Jason Day is someone who does have the course history. My concern with Day is his ball striking is not as great as I would have liked to have seen it, but every other metric that he has been so good right now that it's just kind of like if he puts that his approach number is up this week. If he finds that this week, everything else he's doing is so great that he can win this tournament.
Yeah, I could see that. And Adam Scott is in that range right next to Jason Day. I'm curious. And any thoughts on him?
Listen, of everyone in this field, he probably has the best tournament history, and hard to ignore that. So, for me, he's going to be a small percentage of my lineups. I just don't like his recent form. I actually think he's a little bit overrated as a golfer, but this seems to be his favorite course. So, you got to like someone who consistently does well here. He seems to like playing here. So I'll have a few shares of him, but I'm definitely not going to be overweight.
Yeah, I think Tyrrell Hatton is really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of guys here, including Jordan Spieth, that don't have good course history here, at least not in the last 3-4 years. I guess the argument for Jordan Spieth, though, is he hasn't been good in 3 or 4 years since 2017. So, you can kind of ignore his course history here. With Tyrrell Hatton, you're right. He does seem kind of underpriced because the way we looked at him 2 weeks ago, and it's not like he's been that bad. He's had a bad round here and there, but the way he came back from a 77 to whatever he shot on Friday, it's actually really impressive. And if this course, it's not an easy course, and he's the type of guy that can kind of, I think, grind out, a top 5 or a top 10. So he's definitely on my radar. It's so weird for me to even consider Jordan Spieth because I have not been on this train for years. And it's like, oh my gosh, am I really going to come around now? There's value there. I just wonder, man, the guy's hitting, Joel, he's hitting holes in like a hole in one. Okay, let's just take that away. Does he still have a good tournament? I guess the answer is yes. But then he's drilling it from 35 feet. I understand he's the best putter in the world, but he had an 84-foot 9-inch putt. I think it was on Saturday, the same day as the hole in one. He came within maybe 3 centimeters of draining the putt. It was, I'm watching it, and of course I have no shares of Spieth, so I'm just so frightened at how my lineups are being affected after the hole in one and after, he chips out somewhere for a birdie. And then that putt happens, and just picture me watching the TV and just watching that ball just slowly just get to what looks to be the center of the cup, and I'm literally by myself thinking to myself is this really, can anybody be this good at the short game? It seems video game-ish to me, and I just wonder, can this be replicated? But to your point, maybe it doesn't need to be replicated. Maybe if he's 50% of that, because he's being better off the tee and he's not killing himself off the tee, maybe it all kind of evens out and he's just a top 10 golfer again in all the metrics. So this might be the first time I actually have some Jordan Spieth shares. I can't.
And another thing to credit him and a reason to play him is, this week more than most, because of the course length, it's a little bit shorter. Mm-hmm. I'm actually weighing around the green game more than I am off the tee and things like that. So if we're looking at this as, all those long hitters who are really hitting all those fairways are getting neutralized by Spieth because he won't be in. Yes, there's water, which will hurt him, but he knows how to basically say, let's just not go in the water, right? He can just not take out his driver this week because it's not that long. He doesn't need to. And then if he's going to gain a significant amount of strokes around the green, which is where the challenge is going to be here, that could be the difference in winning this tournament. So I think that almost plays to his strength this course, and could be another reason why he might be a good play.
Yeah, you're right. There will be a lot of clubbing down. He's not going to need to hammer it, which is obviously going to help him. Let's get to a few people in the chat. S Guy, he is tried and true, a faithful listener, a faithful live listener, I should say. By the way, for everybody listening, if you haven't already rated the podcast on Apple, if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. I'm sure all of you have, but if you haven't, definitely 5-star review. Write a review if you can, but 5 stars is all you need. Tell your friends. Definitely helps. Look at this, Joel. Look at this.
Oh,
What is Michael Raziel doing? What is he doing? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this, but we miss you too, my friend. I hope I hope I'm not doing so well doing the host gig that we don't need you next week. There was a question before we get to, and I think we're done with the 8K range. So before we get to that huge 7K range, to me, the question is for the people that are listening to the podcast: what kind of build would you recommend for this week? Stars and scrubs or balanced? I'm leaning more towards balanced. Now, first of all, balanced might mean different things to different people. I'm just kind of wearing my lawyer hat here. But for me, balanced means a lot of 9K guys, maybe dip your toe into the 10K range. But for me, it's more like 9K guys and high 7K guys, maybe 8K guys, so that I don't have to, maybe I'll go to the low sevens. But I really, in a single entry or maybe even a 3 max, I don't want to go into that 6K range. I kind of don't want to go into the low 7K range. I think there's guys I can lean on at the top that are low enough price-wise for me to get into that upper 7K range or mid 7K range and stop it there. So for me, it's more balanced. I think if you're in a big tournament, obviously there's a lot. I mean, listen, Tyler Duncan is 6,000 or 6,100. I mean, this guy was second on approach last week. Cam Percy's a guy, there's plenty of guys that you can punt all you want, but just you got to keep in mind these are different type of punt plays than a regular tournament because this field is so stacked and it's so large. So a punt play in a 120 person tournament with only 35 of the top 50 players or 31 of the top 50 players is a lot different from 47 of the top 50 with a 154 player field. So you got to kind of keep that context in mind when you're considering a guy in the 6,500 range, for example. But that's a long answer. Joel, what do you think?
No, I'm with you. The build, it really feels like, because it is not the reason for it is because there's so much good value in the high sevens and low eights that if you can round out 6 golfers with all guys in there, it's great. And you're still getting elite guys in the high 8, low 9 range where you can get the winner of the tournament. So balance for sure. One exercise I challenge people to do is early, I would often do this, and I'm trying to improve myself, is when you're building a lineup, right, and you put in, your 4, your 5 guys, and you see how much money you have left, then you just go and find the guy that will fit the last 2 salaries that are left, right? And you're it may not be someone you were targeting. It's just that's how much money you have left, right? I want to flip that. That's not how to play DFS, right? Because that one miss, because that was how much you had left, ruins your whole lineup. So what I tell people is pick your player pool, whether it's 15, 20 golfers, narrow it down to 15 or 20 plays, pull out 1 guy in each range, 2 guys in each range that you like the most, then build your lineups off of that player pool, right? It doesn't mean you even use your entire player pool. But what it does is it eliminates you getting the urge to just fill in whatever is the 6th spot because you got 5 guys you liked, and that 6th spot will just be random. And that kills you. So if you get your narrow down to 20, then you can start building around, your player pool of 20 guys that you really like, and make sure it's, diversified by salary type. And then it'll be a lot easier for you to have success that way.
So that's really good advice, because I think a lot of people have 4 or 5 guys in mind when they're making a lineup, or 3 or 4 guys, whatever it is. And then they're like, oh, well, who fits at 7,300 here? And then they're like, oh, I heard about this guy on a podcast. There was some upside there. So I'll go ahead and throw him in. But he was never really in your original conviction of plays. So it's really good advice. Think of a player pool. Think of guys you don't have to necessarily write it out or type out the players, but think of the guys you actually want to roster. And if you're fitting in a guy because he fits price-wise, but you didn't like him originally, or you didn't like him enough originally to consider him in that player pool, you're doing it wrong. So what that means is you have to change something with those other 4 or 5 guys that you have. Just alter that a little bit to another guy that's, like Joel said, in your player pool. And then instead of that 7,300, all of a sudden you have 7,700. And oh wow, look, I loved this guy. I can put him in there. So that's actually really good advice. And honestly, I think that's advice that almost no one heeds in the DFS community, because they're just so stuck on, I want to get all these guys in the lineup. Let me just throw this guy, hope and pray. I hope this guy. And then when he doesn't make it, you're like, oh, I never liked that guy in the first place. What was I doing?
And another thing that does for you too is I often find, I might be on 10 guys. Typically, honestly, listen, I'm not so great that the number 1 and 2 guy that I'm on win the tournament or the best plays, right? But usually of my top 10, I'm good. Some of those guys, maybe the 4th guy is going to do really well, right? So instead of just saying the first guy that came to mind that I liked, I'm going to play, it makes me have to step back and say, okay, I did really like DJ, but the only way I'm getting 6 guys within my player pool is by coming down off DJ to Finau, enabling me to come up on this next player to get a full 6 guys in my 20-man player pool. And that's probably a better roster construction than leaving in DJ and praying with Cameron Percy as your last guy.
Ouch. Former secret weapon Cam Percy. So we actually hit with the secret weapon. It wasn't a big hit. I mean, he made the cut, of course. I think he had an eagle, maybe a birdie streak, but that's 30-4 now, the secret weapon. So stay tuned for Discord tomorrow. Speaking of Discord, we got this question here. Oh, by the way, Charlie says stash, because I guess he saw the Michael Raziel comment. And this is a question. So Todd, I don't have FanDuel pricing in front of me, but if you want to type into the chat the guys you'd consider in that 8,700 range on FanDuel, please feel free, and we'll tell you who we like. And then, of course, Charlie says that I don't have enough black shirts to take over the host game for Michael. I do, actually. It's sad but true. I totally do, my friend. Let's get to the 7K range. Let me start with this. I'll probably just go down to like 7,500. I may actually go down to 7,400 because I want to talk about Corey Connors for a second. But there's so much to like in this range. So you're really going to have to make a lot of decisions here. Much like you're having to make in the 9K range, you can't play everybody. So in the 7K range, you're going to have to leave some guys you really like off your list. Guys that are jumping out at me, a couple of guys that I should mention, that were jumping out at Patrick and Steven, because we were chatting earlier in the week as well. Cam Smith, he's usually on my radar. He's really good. Like, Patrick has an amazing stat on Cam Smith that he'll share probably in his article or in Discord, but he's really good against tough fields. The last 6 tough fields he's faced, his DraftKings scoring is really, really impressive. We saw his recent form is really good. So I like Cam Smith. Tommy Fleetwood I like a lot. I mean, Tommy Fleetwood looks to have finally found his iron game where he had kind of lost it before. His course history here is good. His price is good. I think Tommy Fleetwood's a really smart play. Will Zalatoris, what can we say about him? The ball striking is great. He manages to have a couple average days here and there out of the 4, but then he somehow sneaks into the top 10 or the top 7 without any course experience. The guy is just a machine. So Will Zalatoris, he's still kind of finding his way, it seems, and yet still top 10ing every tournament. So I love him. Abraham Answer, I'm a little undecided on him. I do like his price. And then let's stop at Corey Connors, and then we'll do the rest of the 7K list. I want to get your opinion on Corey Connors, because a lot of times we see a guy in the mid 7K range, or, a guy of Corey Connors' skill level, and he did really well in one tournament, and we're like, well, he's Corey Connors. He's not going to do it back to back. But the reality is he's just such a good ball striker. And so that doesn't typically just go away. I mean, good putting might go away. He was a pretty decent putter last week. But if I can lean on ball striking in a tournament like this, I feel like I have a guy that's going to make the cut with the requisite upside that we saw last week. So, he is popular. It looks like he's going to be well over 10%, but still seems like a good play to me. Do you have thoughts on Corey Connors, and then start off the 7K range for us?
Yeah, so I'll say I normally never play Corey Connors. I'm not a Corey Connors believer. The ball striking's there. I see that, right? It's hard to ignore. And yeah, it's hard to get away from this week, right? At this price, in this field, getting a guy who's going to grade out as one of the better ball strikers in the entire field, and a guy who's he's typically not a great putter, who, found something putting last week. I think you're right. I think it's a really good play, especially with the thought process around, we want to get 6 cut makers, right? And so Corey Connors is the opposite of hey, let me just take a shot on somebody that's going to be low owned that might help me win a GPP. Corey Connors is the one that's saying, I'm going to get 6 cut makers and I'm going to cash. And he has the upside to get you a top 10 and win a tournament. But he's also pretty safe in that he should help you to compete as well and not kill you. So yeah, I like Corey Connors a lot this week.
Upper 7K range, starting at 7,900. Who are some guys that you're going to be leaning on?
Listen, the hard thing about this week, especially from a GPP perspective, is that, I'm one of the guys you just named, right? And so is everyone else. These guys are mispriced, maybe because the field's loaded. So it feels like they're mispriced. They're normally priced higher, but maybe because the field's so loaded, they are actually accurately priced. But we're getting guys that we would normally see in the high 8s, low 9s, in the mid 7s, which is why we're able to build out these really well-rounded rosters. So we see that. Everyone else is seeing that. The ownership on these guys, I have to imagine, I'm on all the same guys that you just said, it's going to be really high. That's the GPP issue this week. there's probably a player pool of 25 people out there that the whole world is on. And I have to imagine they're going to be over 15% owned. And how is that going to shape out when at the end on Sunday when there's 100-something thousand people in a big tournament that, how many people are on the same guy? So that's what my concern is. So if you want to go through the guys I'm targeting this range, I think maybe one guy you didn't mention that I'm on is Joaquin Niemann, who's striking the ball really well. He's playing, I think he could have been priced in the high eights and we wouldn't have blinked an eye. So he's another one who I really like. Niemann doesn't have a course history, but his recent form has been really good. I think an interesting one from a GPP perspective, if you want to get different, because he burned everyone last week, is Louis O.
I know where you're going.
Yeah, right? I mean, no one's going to go back to that well. He burned you. You lost all your money. I'm not playing this guy again. And you can say the same thing with Justin Rose, too. I mean, he played but kind of pulled out of the tournament. But, there was a lot to like about Louis going into last week, right? He was doing a lot of things really well. It's unfortunate what happened. I can't imagine that blunder will happen again, right? It sounds like if he's still in the player pool by tomorrow night, he's going to play. And we liked what we saw out of him. His recent form is there. So I don't know how hurt he is. I don't have that information, unfortunately. But if you're someone who's playing a big tournament, that could be a good way for you to get different, especially because we know who the high ownership guys are going to be.
Yeah, makes sense. Anybody else in Abraham Answer, for example? Any opinions on him?
So Answer I like. The breaking point for me on Answer is going to be ownership percentage. So if he gets to a point where it looks like it's going to be close to 20 or 15, over 15% in a GPP, that's how I'm playing. It's hard to get overshared on someone over 15% who's not like DJ, right? Who's not like pretty much a lock. So I'm going to be waiting on ownership percentage. If I see him coming below 12%, 10%, I'm going to be playing him. I like him. I think another interesting one for this week is Billy Horschel. So Billy disappointed a little bit last week, but let's not forget, last week was tough. I mean, it's not an excuse, right? Tough course, but I don't think this week is going to be that tough. I think we're going to see lower scores. And if you want to just look at it this way, Billy seems to be a guy that plays better on easier courses. He does really well on courses where there's low scoring. When it's a tough course, I'm not sure that's his thing. So he didn't make the cut last week. I think we're going to get an easier course this week. Nothing has changed in that. You remember when the Florida one started, Billy thrives in the Florida run. He went to college in Florida. He loves the Bermuda greens. Like all that is still true. And this is what we're getting here. So he missed the cut on a tough course last week. I don't think that means everyone should get off of him. I think he's still playing really well. I think he's a good, and she could be, when you're looking at Zalatoris, Neiman, Answer, Fleetwood, those are going to be the really high ownership guys. I don't think Billy will be as highly owned, and I think he's pretty much as talented as those guys.
Yeah, that's fair. You're definitely going to pick up ownership leverage there. As I go down to the low 7K range, let me just mention a couple guys. I don't really want to live here. I want to live in the range that we just talked about. But a couple guys kind of jump out at me. I mean, Kevin Na, if you want to pick up ownership leverage, I think is a pretty decent play. He should be a good course fit here. Ryan Palmer, he's one of those guys that can sink your lineup or just completely make your lineup. His course history here and his recent history in general, it's like he finishes top 10 or he finishes 40th or he misses the cut. It's just one of those things. If you want to take that gamble, it's a decent GPP gamble, not something you want to force in cash. Cameron Tringale, I mean, I'm a truther. I know Sticks Picks is a truther as well. He was on him last week. I think he's on him this week. We'll find out on the Better Golf podcast because I think that's being recorded today with at Tee Off Sports with Spencer Aguiar. That'll drop tomorrow. But I think it's a good price. He's typically great on approach, and I consider this an approach second shot golf course. So I like. And by the way, the approach shots won't be quite as long. I mean, there will be plenty of long approach shots, but not as many of them as last week. And I don't think Tringale graded out really well in that 175 to 200 plus range. So while there's still going to be those approach shots here, there's not quite as many of them. So I think that favors a guy like Cameron. The one guy I want to ask you about, by the way, I don't think I'll be on Christian Bezuidenhout, but I do think he's a pretty good play. Maybe I'll have one or two lineups with him. But the one guy I wanted to ask you about that has really been good, at least playing in Europe, and was really good last week, and is only 7,200. Any love for Lee Westwood?
So it's funny. I actually like Lee Westwood. I'm a fan of his, and I liked him a lot last week when everyone was kind of saying fade him. He's not going to scrimmage road. I played him. So as someone saying this as someone who typically does like Lee Westwood, I am not going back to him this week. The reason for it is there's better options, in my opinion. Like Lee West was the type of guy I like to target in a field league last week, where you didn't have every big superstar. One or two guys didn't play well. It was a tough course. He just struck the ball really well all week, was consistent, didn't mess up, and was right there on Sunday. I don't think this course will play like that. I think you're going to need to make some really difficult shots and score really low. And I don't think this is the type of course that he would excel at. So as someone who normally would want to play him, I'm not going to be having too many shares of Lee Westwood this week. But down this range, I think I'm definitely with you on Tringal. I mean, it's been over a month of him consistently ball striking really well in this price range. He's definitely a really strong play. Palmer as well. Two guys that you didn't mention in this range that I'm on. Less so Sam Burns. So Sam Burns missed the cut last week. I think that's turning some people off to him. But let's not forget he was third before that. He had a good run at AT&T. He did well at the Waste Management. He's on a pretty good streak. Missing the cut at Arnold Palmer is a really tough course. It's not something I hold against people. Right? If you miss a couple cuts in a row, fine. Right now he's on a great run. He missed the cut at a really tough course. I think it's safe to go back to him here where he can do it again. No course history, so he's got to rely on his ball striking metrics, which is what I'm doing here. And the other one who I like even more, one of my favorite plays in this range is Lanto Griffin. He is really just his ball striking is there. His recent form, I mean, he's top 26 at least in the last 4 tournaments. A 7th 4 weeks ago. He's consistently showing up. So especially from the thought process of let's at least just cash and make money. And I think he's pretty safe this low to get someone who should make the cut and compete. And I think he's good enough to get into the top 10 or 15 and be in the winning lineups as well.
Yeah, I'm going to agree on both of those, Lanto and Sam Burns. I think Sam Burns probably carries a little bit more upside and maybe just as much ownership leverage, because you're right, he did burn some people last week. And because his name is Sam Burns and not a high-end guy that missed the cut, a lot more people will be off of him. So, yeah, I think Sam Burns is super smart. I'll have him in a couple lineups. So that rounds out the 7K range for me. So let me start off with some of the guys in the 6K range. So I don't want to spend too much time here because I just spent a lot of time saying, hey, I don't really think you should be living in this range. But there's certainly, like maybe in a 20 max or 150 max, there's certainly the guys that feel free to take a shot on because they're really good golfers. Like there are really good golfers down here. It's just I'm like in a single entry or a 3 max. I'm just not going to be going here. I'll tell you what though, I did my 200, like the same tournament where I came in 20th, the $200 single entry. I made a lineup Sunday. These prices came out Friday, right? Because the prices came out early, which by the way is why Bryson DeChambeau is priced how he is. He would be priced in the 10K range if they had actually waited till Monday like they normally do. So I suppose you're getting a discount there, right? But my first lineup, and I'm not going to change it because I like the lineup so much. It included a 6K guy in there, and I'm not going to tell you exactly who it was, but I am going to discuss the 6K guys in here, so you can kind of like draw whatever conclusion you want.
What day was it? So I want to make sure I can figure it out based on the day you put it.
Yeah, it was Sunday that I made the lineup.
Okay, early after Sunday's round or before the round?
It was during the round, I believe.
Okay, all right.
So draw your conclusions. Okay, so let's start it off. Ryan Moore, I think, is really interesting because he missed a ton of cuts in a row, but he actually found some form the last time he was out. And honestly, he's typically a really good ball striker. I'll take a look at his recent form. I'm not looking at it right now, but Ryan Moore is just kind of a solid, I think, really sneaky player that's going to be extremely low owned. I mean, I know everybody in the 6K range is generally pretty low owned, but I think Ryan Moore is a sneaky play. Charlie Hoffman, 6,800. I've been on him for a couple of weeks now, and he's paid off every time. I even had him, I think, in a matchup last week, and he paid off there too. So Charlie Hoffman is really striking the ball well. So 6,800, I think you're getting a bargain for him. Emiliano Grillo is a guy I've been on for quite some time. I mean, honestly, like a year now. He's just a good ball striker. What's interesting about Grillo, though, his approach game hasn't been that good if you look at the last 24 rounds or so, last 4 or 5 tournaments actually. But his approach game started to look pretty good last week. His off the tee game has looked consistently really good. So if that ball striking he's one of my write-ups in the initial picks, if that ball striking is there, he's going to make the cut. So I like him. Matthew Naismith, I think, is interesting to go back to. He burned a lot of people, and anytime that happens, I think you're picking up some good ownership leverage with a good golfer that, again, we just liked a week ago. I'll go really quick through the rest of the guys. James Hahn. He's a guy I kind of have an affinity for. I don't think he's a great play. I think he's a decent GPP play because nobody will be on him. But don't forget, at the Waste Management, he was on the back 9 with a 3-shot lead. So the upside is there. It's not there often, but it's there. So I like James Hahn. Richie Wierenski, you might think I'm chasing points. He's only 6,400. He was awesome last week, particularly good with the short game. But Richie Wierenski's made 5 cuts in a row. And his last 2 tournaments here, I believe 2019 and 2018, 47th and 23rd. So he's comfortable here. He's made 5 cuts in a row, and he competed. I think, what did he finish? Top 5 last week? 4th? So this is a guy, again, that, I hate to chase points, but I think he's solid. And then I'll just go right down to Tyler Duncan and Cam Percy. Tyler Duncan, 6,100, Cam Percy, 6,000. I don't love them. I mean, this is a stacked field. They probably won't show up, anywhere near the top 20, but Tyler Duncan was great on approach last week. He's typically pretty accurate with his driver, good on approach. Not too much not to like when you consider the range he's in. And Cam Percy, former secret weapon, he's just a solid ball striker, and he might grind his way to a cut. Not much upside with Cam Percy, though.
Yeah, no, I like a lot of the guys that you mentioned. That sounds a lot like the guys I'm targeting. I want to just kind of touch on a few guys that you didn't mention in this range. I'm going to start from the bottom of my pool, from the lowest salary, and work my way up. And I think someone that's really interesting, I wonder what his ownership percentage we'll get to, is Andrew Putnam. So Andrew Putnam's coming out back-to-back top 5s. So you want to talk about recent form at someone you're getting at $6,300 in this field. I think that's just a really good bargain. In addition to that, something that I'm seeing, and maybe I'm a little bit different, I'm really overvaluing, I think, around the green game this week. I think these are some challenging courses. Guys aren't good. They're small greens. It's going to be tough to get it on from a distance. So guys who are able to gain an advantage and gain strokes around the green should, I think, have an edge, and that's what he is, right? Putnam's an around the green guy. His short game's lights out, and he's kind of one of those ones, if he can avoid mistakes off the tee and then score well around the green, I think he could have a really good week. So I think that he's also a good way for you to get different. There's a few other guys down here that I'm going to mention. For the most part, being honest, I'm trying to avoid the 6K range as much as I can. So we're going to have a few plays here, some guys to think about, but for the most part, we're not trying to spend too much time in the 6K range because likely not great guys to target. I'll go back to Naismith as well, like Sia said, and the reasoning was perfect, right? He missed a cut last week. People got off him. He's been one of the most elite ball strikers on the tour over the last couple months. And if you're thinking that he hasn't completely lost that and that will come back, he could compete this week and be a top 15 play at this price range. I think we're definitely getting a steal. I love Griot as well. Griot feels like he's a little bit underpriced here, coming off 21st and 11th, where he also has a course history where his last 3 times out, he was in 11, 37, and 26. There's a lot to like about a Griot this week. And Luke List, List last 2 times out, not great form. So for this course, you're not sure if that's someone you want to target, but he can strike the ball with the best of them. And in this price range, and this is really low, the 6,700 is really cheap for a guy who's capable of really getting up in the top 20. So I think that will round it up. I'll throw in Brandon Steele as well. Brandon Steele has a top 6 at this tournament 3 years ago. He was 18th last week. He's made 5 cuts in a row at $6,700. That's what you need in the 6K range.
Yeah, Brandon Steele's one of those guys that's just always underappreciated. So I think that's a super smart play. And Andrew Putnam's a smart play too. It's funny because he is so low price-wise, but to your point about ownership, it's looking like 5-6%, which is super high for that range, but it's not super high for your lineup. It's still 5 or 6%. So it's not like it's not chalk in the true sense, in my opinion. But people are noticing, and Andrew Putnam is definitely he's been legit. So, okay, so we're done with the DFS portion. I know I have outrights in first-round leaders. Joel, do you have any is the question.
Of course. Let's get into them.
All right. So why don't you start with outrights, then I'll go, and then we can go to the first-round leaders.
Okay, let's do that. So for this week, do we want – so I guess we'll do a little bit of both, right? I think realistically, the winner's going to have to come from the top. There's too loaded in my opinion. I could be wrong.
I agree with you.
It's too loaded of a field to, I think, start chasing our 100-to-1 odd bets this week. Those guys, maybe if you want to take those guys for top 5s or 10s, that I could get up behind, but there's too many of the top guys here where I don't want to take any 100-to-1 shots. So if we want to find value, we can still find value, but finding value for me this week is targeting guys that are maybe 55-to-1. For example, Cameron Smith. I think Sia made some really good points about Cameron Smith, right? He thrives in tough competition. We've seen him have some really great finishes recently at 55-to-1. I think that's a really good, smart target, especially someone that seems to be getting overlooked considering the strength of the field. Another one at 70-1, I just feel like the odds are a little bit too low for him for the way he's been playing, is Will Zalatoris. Will Zalatoris, we haven't seen him win anything yet, but he's striking the ball as well as anybody. So basically, if he has a hot week with the putter, he can absolutely win this tournament. So at 70-1, those are really good odds.
I like all of those. Before I get to my outrights, I just wanted to read this question here. It says, you think some of these guys who played well last week, all 4 days, will they be more fatigued than the rest of the field, like maybe be slightly cautious, or are they such pros they will be okay? I'll give my opinion first on this. I think they'll be okay. I mean, I think if you have a guy like Max Homa, who I believe is playing his 8th tournament in a row, I think that's something to maybe look at. That's got to be like slowly fatiguing. But again, I understand your point. It was a tough course. There were a couple tough days. They were playing for 4 days, but I really have no worries there. In fact, I'd probably prefer a guy that played last week than a guy who's coming off like a 1 or 2 week break, personally. Joel,
what I think is interesting is the follow-up question, which is it rare to win back-to-back? And that's the better question, because for me, it is. It's rare. It's not impossible. That doesn't mean you can't play the winner of a tournament for the next week. By no means does that mean that. But I do agree. I actually do tend to not fade, but play less a guy that's won a tournament, because they're probably not coming in as hungry and motivated. They just got paid big. They've been celebrating all week, right, with a big check and their friends and what have you. So I would say I would lower my ownership percentage of someone who's coming off of a win. And Bryson this week, I actually don't think is a great course fit. So I'm not going to completely fade him, but yeah, I'm not going to be too high on Bryson coming off a win.
Fair enough. And we got a question from S Guy here, or a comment. Werenski sounds like the secret weapon. He is not going to be the secret weapon. Good guess. He was one of the original secret weapons. Discord tomorrow. We've got so many articles coming out tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night too. WinDailySports.com. This is a lineup. I didn't even see this here. All right. Before I get to my outrights, little contrarian: Rahm, Hovland, Neiman, Zalatoris, Connors, Kirk. I mean, first of all, if you're calling that contrarian, I don't think it really is at all. I think Kirk might be slightly contrarian in the sense that he's not going to carry, probably more than 5-6%. But that looks like a pretty like chalky lineup. I don't hate it as a chalky lineup as long as it's not in a huge like single entry. I mean, it's not as long as it's not in a huge tournament. If it's in a smaller single entry, I don't really have a problem with it, because as chalky as like Neiman and Zalatoris and Rahm, well, and Connors might be, you're still probably going to be different versus a field of 1,000. Joel, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's contrarian. I think it's going to be pretty highly owned, but it's a good lineup. I want all those guys, so I think it's a good strong lineup. Don't listen. Yes, GPPs. You can't play all the chalky guys because that doesn't make sense. But don't overweight that, because the last thing you want to do is put out a lineup of that's the winning lineup and then change it because you thought it'd be too highly owned, right? So if that's the lineup you really like, yes, it's probably going to be highly owned. But if you like it, roll with it. It looks like a good lineup.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wouldn't change a thing unless it was like a 250,000 person or a 50,000 person or entry tournament. Then I think you might want to consider pivoting off one of those guys. All right, so my outrights. I'll be quick about this. I agree with you. I don't really have many by way of long shots. I threw Charlie Hoffman in there because 125-1 sounded fun, but I'll go from furthest to least from an odds perspective. Adam Scott at 80-1. I don't love him in DraftKings, but again, from a value betting standpoint, 80-1 with a guy with this type of course history, if he finds the ball striking like we know Adam Scott has had before, 80-1's a nice number there. Cam Smith, 55-1. You touched on that. Tommy Fleetwood, 45-1. I think that's a pretty good number for Tommy Fleetwood. And then as we go down the shorter odds, Tyrrell Hatton, 35-1. He's talented, and if he's hot, he can beat anybody in this field. And then finally, the last one, Victor Hovland at 28-1. I don't really love that one. I wish it was 35-1, but Victor Hovland is one of the best ball strikers in this field, like period. So 28-1's a decent number.
I like that a lot. My biggest advice for betting outrights this week is take like the range of guys that we're giving you at 35-1 and up. If you like one of the favorites, you'll likely be able to get them in not too much of worse of odds unless they have a 4-stroke lead heading into Saturday. If they're competing, you'll get them at plus 600 or 700 going in, and you're probably better off just taking it then knowing that they're competing. So that's what I would recommend. If you want to take one of the top guys, wait till Saturday to take it. If you're going to take a guy like, Hovland or one of those guys, if they're in the top 5 going in, then those odds are going to come way up. So those are the guys you got to take now.
Yep, that totally makes sense. All right, first round leaders, what you got?
So first round leader, now we can get fun, right? So first round leader is now where we can listen. You don't have to. You can do well day one and not win the tournament. So these guys, we can get a little bit of longer odds. I'm going to kind of scroll all the way down. I think one guy that could be interesting. It's we didn't mention him at all in the DFS portion is Francisco Molinari, right? So he doesn't have the recent form, but what he does have is a good course history. So he's done well here before. Not too far long ago, he did have he's got 3 top 10s this year. So he's kind of in off and on. And his odds for first round leaders 100-1. This is a guy that can compete with the best of them. And he's been worse the last year or two than we were accustomed to seeing him. But we've seen him get 3 top 10s this year. So we've seen that form recently. We know he likes this course. And 100-1 just seems like too much for Francisco Molinari. So I think that's just a really good odds, a really good value that we're finding. Kind of down here for the first round leader bet. Another interesting one, a guy that's I don't know, do we call him a friend of the show? Someone that we always mention, that we're always bringing up, Henrik Norlander, right? I don't think he's going to win this tournament, but at 125-1 for him to have the best first round, he's still playing pretty well. His recent form is here. I think people from a DFS perspective are off of him because he wasn't great last week, but he's been good before that. And I certainly think he can show up for one day. So those will be my 2 long shots for this week.
Yeah, Norlander, if he can find the putter, if he can find a hot putter, he can be a first-round leader. We've seen him near the top of leaderboards on day one before, so I don't mind that. He kind of disappointed me. It almost felt like he sort of gave up Saturday and Sunday. I know he didn't really actually give up, but there was so little scoring coming. Because actually, Norlander was on the 6-for-6 team that didn't finish in 20th place. It cashed, but it was, it was kind of like it was like 200 entry. I think I made I netted $100 but Norlander, he just didn't score Saturday and Sunday. So you're right. People will be off him. I think that's a decent first round leader play. All right. So here are mine. I'm going to break some news in a second. So this is exciting. Everybody buckle up. Let's start with some lower odds. Webb Simpson, 40-1. I just think Webb Simpson's a good course fit. If this number was 30-1, it wouldn't be fun for me, but 40-1 is just high enough for me to be like, oh yeah, that's kind of fun. I can put $5 on that for $200. I can put $10 on that for $400. That's still a very fun sweat. So Webb at 40, Cam Smith at 66-1. So not only do we think Cam Smith might be good this weekend, but he shows up near the top of leaderboards on day one often. And I know that because I bet him first round leader quite a bit since the winter break. And he's been good. So I think 66-1 is decent. Again, these are first round leader bets. So it's not like, I'm not pretending like these are going to be it's a hit, but 66-1 is a good number there. Ryan Palmer 90-1, because we always take Ryan Palmer when it's a first round leader time. And honestly, he can get hot. 90-1 is a decent number. Alex Noren, that was like a hunch play. Honestly, I haven't even really looked at Alex Noren's metrics as much as I need to even know if he's a good DFS play. He's one of the few guys that I've sort of ignored so far. But 125-1, Alex Noren can really get going. He's just one of those guys that's, you're looking on Saturday and he's near the top 20. You're looking on Friday and he's in the top 10 because he's having a great day. So Alex Noren at 125-1. And then here's the breaking news. I know, but I feel like the Alex Noren call is just kind of a whatever call because I don't really have much to back that up. But the other ones seem good to me. But here's the breaking news. All right. This guy's 66-1. We've already talked about him. He finished 10th last week. Looks like he's finding the iron game, finally. The last 2 years here, 5th and 7th. 5th and 7th. So the course history is there. He's comfortable here. He's finding his ball striking game. And on Tuesday night at 9:12 p.m., I'm telling you that on Thursday night, your first round leader for this tournament, the Players, is none other than, are you ready? Are you sitting down? Tommy Fleetwood at 66-1. Take the bet right now. It's easy money. It's definitely going to cash. I want you to go to your significant other, if you have one, and tell her you need to empty out the checking account, the savings account, because Tommy Fleetwood is definitely going to be first round leader. Be responsible, put everything you have on it. Right, Joel?
You should mortgage your home 100%. You don't want to look back after he's the first round leader and think that you didn't mortgage your home and put all that money on it. So
see, you're just being logical. We're just being smart with your money.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the breaking news. Tommy Fleetwood will be your first round leader at the Players Championship, 66-1. Great number. Joel, it looks like we have a question here before we get out of here. Thoughts on GPP, FanDuel, Scott, Putnam, Fleetwood, Zal, Hobbs, Simpson. I like that lineup quite a bit.
Yeah, that looks good.
You're going down in that low 6K range, but you have good reason to with Putnam. Joel gave you the kind of the stats on him, so we got a hater in the house, and he's part of the Win Daily team. Stobie, I don't know about you right now, but listen, I'll be honest with you. A few weeks ago, I would have given the same reaction to Tommy Fleetwood, but the ball striking appears to have finally showed up, and when his ball striking is right, and this is kind of a ball striking course, you're going to be in really good shape. So it's again in DFS he's 7,900. So. I'll ask you this before I ask you if you have any parting words, Joel. Who's winning this tournament?
It's a good question. I feel bad because I feel like it's like the cop-out answer, but I think Dustin Johnson's winning the tournament.
All right. I wish I had already come up with a player before I asked you that question, because now I have to answer it. I think I'm debating between Colin Morikawa and Jon Rahm.
Okay.
And I am going to go with Jon Rahm. Even though I don't think I'm going to be super overweight on him in DFS, I just have a feeling the ball striking's there, and outside of the 32nd at the WGC, he's been really good. 5th before that, 13th, 7th, 12th here last year. I just think it might be. It's not a lot behind this, but I think it might be Jon Rahm's time.
I actually like the thought process strategy of, like, I think that makes sense, right? His price and salary is a little high, so maybe it doesn't make sense for your DFS lineup. But hey, you like him, so bet him outright. If he wins the tournament, you still win. And if he doesn't win the tournament, then your DFS lineup's too well. So there's a win-win, right? So I like that thought process.
And furthermore, if you don't take him outright on Thursday, you can always do what I did with DJ when he was 9 strokes back after the restart, and all of a sudden he was 80-1. And I hit that. So it's like, wait, if you like one of these top guys, don't take it now. Just wait for them, like Joel said earlier, wait for them to fall a little bit and get better odds. That's it, Joel. I think that's the show. Any parting words for the players?
Listen, good luck. This is going to be a fun week, right? This is a fun week for DFS. There's the best tournaments on DraftKings, the loaded field. Make sure you play right. We're giving you the plays, but this is going to be fun. So good luck, everyone.
Did we miss Michael? I think we missed Michael. I kind of missed Michael. I talked a lot. Yeah. All right, Michael, we're going to let you back. I think we're going to let you back on the show next Tuesday night. Everybody, if you haven't already downloaded, or I should say subscribed to the Better Golf podcast, that Better is spelled Bettor, Bettor Golf podcast. Check that out. It's going to, the next episode is going to drop tomorrow. It's Spencer Aguiar. It's Nick Bretwish. They're really good at what they do. And a lot of their picks, I think, are going to coincide with what we talked about today. It'll give a little bit more reinforcement to how you should build your DFS lineups and how you should be betting this golf tournament if you so choose. But that's our show. We'll see you next week. We'll see you next Tuesday night. And the one last parting word, of course, is
Sports.
Nice.